DFS. Welcome into week 13 of one of the most accurate DFS shows in the industry. This is the Adjusted Line Play Report presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite, and I am your host, Todd Hoffman. You can find myself over on Twitter at Todzilla1337, and you can find Zilla Fantasy Elite over on Twitter at Zilla Fantasy. Today's show is powered once again by Rain Total Body Fuel, folks. Oh, this stuff is tasty. Are you looking to make it rain some cash in DFS? Tune in to the Adjusted Line Play Report from Zilla Fantasy Elite. Follow host Todd Hoffman while he delivers the most accurate DFS advice in the industry and make it rain. All right, folks, today's flavor, cherry limeade, one of my probably top 6 here from Rain. Don't know if the microphone can pick that up, but it's good stuff. Good way to start the show off, folks. Let's go make it rain some cash in our DFS lineups. And how about this? Let's just do a real quick audit of how we're doing this year. Now we gotta make that cash. Here we go. 9 out of 12 weeks, the Adjusted Line Play Report has been helping us with a return on our investments put in. So 9 out of the 12 weeks, well over 70% of the weeks, we are putting in some entry fees into large field FanDuel tournaments. Large field being 400, 500,000 entrants, ones that, you have to finish in the top 17 to 20% in order to actually make any money back on that particular lineup. We are in between 25 to 400% over our entry fees. Basically a 25 to 400% return on investment in 9 out of 12 weeks in those large field FanDuel tournaments. So this show is successful, folks. Keep that in mind. We're looking at the offensive and defensive line play and the matchups that are given to us in those particular games, and basically trying to build a game theory out of that particular matchup. As we know, football is won and lost in the trenches. Why don't DFS players look at the offensive and defensive line stats? I don't know. But that's where this comes into play, and it is highly successful, as you see. 9 out of 12 weeks, winning that money. With that being said, we do have a pretty big slate here. Main slate, 12 games this week. Then we'll get into the Sunday night and Monday night games. I did play a Thursday night game based off of the Adjusted Line Play Report. I only put one lineup into the dime package on DraftKings, so put in 10 cents. I made 75. I finished in the top 500 actually out of 90,000 entrants. So again, folks, this stuff is very, very, very accurate. And if you haven't already, you should hit that subscribe button. You should hit the follow button over on Twitter for Todzilla1337 and Zilla Fantasy. And let's get this underway. First and most highest game total on the slate is Kansas City and Cincinnati. Let's just adjust this a little bit. There we go. Kansas City going into Cincinnati actually as 2.5-point road favorites. 52.5-point Vegas game total is the number one game on the slate. We're going to get into Kansas City's offensive pass protection, number 3 and number 2. Very good. Cincinnati 30th and 9th at getting after the quarterback. This is suggesting the offensive protection will be very good for Patrick Mahomes. He should have plenty of time to get rid of the ball and basically find whatever target that he wants open. This is very good for all players involved. It's very good for Kansas City moving their offense in general. Just keep that in mind. Patrick Mahomes probably going to be very solid. Looking at the run game, Kansas City 8th and 16th, Cincinnati 18th and 15th. Again, this is in Kansas City's favor. Expect Kansas City to be very effective passing the ball. Running the ball, they will still be, it's an above average matchup there. I would expect Pacheco to be solid and expect him pretty much to be getting the majority of the work there. As far as the running backs, I'm not entirely sure what we got going on after the Clyde Edwards-Helaire injury and Ronald Jones, and then getting Melvin Gordon in there on the practice squad, and how that's all going to shake out. But it seems like they like Pacheco. He's a rookie. He's probably earning his playing time now as we progress into the season. So he's actually kind of a sneaky way to get a little bit different on this particular slate. It is a solid matchup. He could rip off. He's got the talent to rip off a very long run. Would not be surprised to see him do that in this particular matchup, especially if Kansas City is, kind of moving the ball at their will on Cincinnati, which they should be able to in the pass game. I would expect them to, focus a little bit more on stopping that pass game and the chunk plays that they're giving up there, and that could open up for some Pacheco nice runs there. So keep that in mind. Kansas City's offense should be outstanding. You're going to want Kelsey. And then as far as pass catchers go, Juju's a little bit too expensive, especially on FanDuel, to look into. DraftKings, you can. If you want to get cheaper options, Watson's the one that's running all the routes while Hardman is out. And then Sky Moore, when he does get on the field, which is only about 35-40% of the time, he's gathering like a 35% targets per route run when he's out there. So when he's out there, he's getting targeted. But Watson is the one that's running the vast majority of the routes. He's just not getting targeted as much when he's actually out there. Kansas City's offense, pretty much all lights go. Just a matter of how you want to attack this. And as we saw earlier, it looks like Kansas City's run game should be effective in this, and that's a way to get different in tournaments. So keep that in mind. On the Cincinnati offensive side, number 22 in offensive pass protection, number 9 in offensive pass DVOA, while Kansas City is 3rd and 18th in the pass rush categories there. It's actually a pretty big favor for Kansas City's defense there and being able to get after the quarterback. I would expect Burrow not to have a ton of time to get rid of the ball. I do know Kansas City is giving up a lot of explosive plays, which is why that discrepancy is there. Number 3 in the pass rush, but 18 in the pass DVOA. Cincinnati is very good at getting explosive plays. I just expect them to be under duress a little bit more, and I'm actually thinking this is going to lean more towards like a Hayden Hurst and Tyler Boyd week, especially with Jamar Chase coming back. I think we're going to see a lot of the Cincinnati side run to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. T. Higgins has been very effective, and you won't get a whole lot of rostership percentage of Tyler Boyd or Hayden Hurst in this. And then again, this is a way to get very different in this popular matchup. Hayden Hurst, Isaiah Pacheco, Tyler Boyd, those are the 3 names you're going to want to put into some of your lineups there to get a little bit different and get access to this game if this isn't the game that you're stacking that particular lineup. I think that's a very good way to get different and get off a lot of the other chalk that's going to be on this particular slate. On the run game side, Cincinnati 15-5 versus Kansas City 23-18. Joe Mixon still in concussion protocol. He missed last week due to the concussion protocol. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, but it doesn't sound good as far as him being able to play this week if he's still maintaining his entry into the concussion protocol. So could be Samaje P. Ryan, however it's pronounced, in the running back chair, which would get you a little bit cheaper option. If that's the case, you're going to get Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Samaje P. Ryan. That will be the 3 most popular plays outside of Joe Burrow on this particular slate. And again, Tyler Boyd and Hayden Hurst are going to be the ones that are left there, especially if Cincinnati is going to be under duress and needing to get the ball out quicker. It's going to be a little bit more dump offs to the running back, the tight end, and Boyd as the underneath pass catcher there. Just keep that in mind. I think that's a way to get different in this particular matchup. Kansas City plays fast. Cincinnati not necessarily super fast there, but could get the pace pushed with this Kansas City offense doing its thing, pretty much moving the ball at will on them. On to the number 2 game on the slate. We've got Detroit at Jacksonville. Again, this is going to be another very popular one, as it does have an over 50 total here on the Vegas side. So Jacksonville going into Detroit. Detroit 1-point home favorites. This line has been going back and forth. Jacksonville favored by 1. A pick 'em. Detroit favored by 1. Pick 'em. It's going back and forth. Vegas expects this to be a close match, which is an ideal situation and exactly what you want in some of these DFS matchups where no one's getting blown out and the offenses are just going wild and staying within 1 or 2 scores of each other all throughout the game. So this is very good for the DFS prospects of this game. Getting into the offensive side for Jacksonville, 8 and 11 in the pass categories. Detroit 27 and 19, pretty poor. Expect Jacksonville to be able to have plenty of time to pass the ball. This is very good, and we'll get into some more specifics here in just a bit. Looking at the run blocking side, Jacksonville 29 and 22. Detroit 20th and 26. Jacksonville will probably be able to run the ball a little bit more effective than they're used to against this Detroit defense. However, it's not a great matchup for them. And Detroit, over the last month or so, has actually been a top 10 team against the run. So just keep that in mind. I don't expect the Jacksonville run game to be super good in this, which is going to funnel more, to the pass game for Jacksonville there. Getting into that, they're going to have plenty of time to pass the ball. Detroit is getting absolutely demolished by slot cornerbacks. I know all the big DFS shows are saying that Zay Jones is going to be popular, and rightfully so. Hit 150 yards last week, which is good. It sounds like he's going to be, top 1 or 2 or 3 wide receivers on rosters in tournaments and in cash lineups this week. A good way to pivot off of that, I think, would be Christian Kirk. Like I said, Detroit's getting absolutely obliterated by slot corners. We should see Christian Kirk operating out of that for the most part, and we've definitely seen him be the red zone threat we would like to see any of our receivers, in our lineups being, treated as. So I think that is an excellent play this week. And Trevor Lawrence stacks, if I'm going to do it, it's probably going to be Ingram and Kirk. And trying to get a little bit off of the more chalky Zay Jones. He's definitely going to be in lineups as he's cheaper, but I do like the Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, just to get a little bit less popularity in these tournaments. On the Detroit side, number 2 and number 14 in the offensive pass protection. Jacksonville dead last at 32 and 30th in defensive pass DVOA. Very, 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 very good for Detroit's pass offense. Jacksonville, same story, getting obliterated by slot corners. Expect Amon-Ra St. Brown to have an absolute smash matchup here. I like both of those two in, getting them, one-offs correlated with each other into my lineups if I'm not stacking this game outright. Jared Goff, certainly viable. Got revenge game narratives for Marvin Jones in Jacksonville versus Detroit. DJ Chark there in Detroit versus Jacksonville. So keep that in mind. I think Jared Goff should have, Amon-Ra St. Brown as the leading wide receiver, leading target getter there. After that, it gets kind of mucky. DJ Chark, pay attention to the rookie there. If he does play, I wouldn't expect him to get a full complement of snaps, but could be somebody that's a stone min that would be very interesting. If he's going to be in a package, it's probably him getting the ball. So, maybe he gets 10 snaps. He's going to be targeted on 3 to 4 of those particular snaps and, in an effort to try to get the ball in his hands. That's Jameson Williams coming back from injury potentially there. On the offensive run blocking side, it's pretty much neutral matchup there. Detroit 5 and 9, Jacksonville 8 and 13. Usually in these scenarios, it's the people who are really good at football that will do well. I'm not necessarily sure Jamal Williams nor DeAndre Swift fit that bill. DeAndre Swift's more so than Jamal Williams. If Detroit's moving the ball at will in the air, certainly could have plenty of scoring opportunities. Same with Jacksonville there in their run game, but Detroit's setting up a little bit better here. And, Jamal Williams, another 1 or 2 touchdowns in this game wouldn't surprise me. And I believe he will be a popular choice as far as getting some action into this Jacksonville-Detroit game. A way to get a little bit different could be DeAndre Swift. We've seen him kind of get there on some receptions and touchdowns in the last few weeks, but not a ton of volume. If this turns into a big blowout or not a blowout, but a big blow-up spot. Teams are just running all over the field. We could certainly see DeAndre Swift with a few more, dump-offs, a few more receptions, a couple of goal line opportunities, maybe punches in a few of them, and he's not going to be as highly rostered as Jamal Williams or other players in this particular slate that are in the pass game. So another good way to get different there. On to the number 3 game on the slate, we have Los Angeles Chargers at the Las Vegas Raiders. Again, this is one of those Vegas game total at 49.5 for this. Las Vegas 1-point favorites here at home, 25.25 team implied total. Chargers 24.25 team implied total. Another one again that has gone back and forth. Vegas favored, Chargers favored, even. So it's going back and forth. People expect this one to be close. As far as popularity in stacking games, I think this is going to be the third one on the list. When you look at Kansas City, Cincinnati, Jacksonville, Detroit, those are going to be very popular games. And then we're looking at Cleveland and Houston likely being another popular game that people are going to be getting into. And I think this Chargers and Vegas game might be flying a little bit under the radar. So getting into it, Los Angeles Chargers, number 5 in offensive pass protection, 21st in offensive pass DVOA. So they get plenty of time there. Vegas, 29th and 32nd in the defensive pass rush categories. Chargers should have plenty of time to pass the ball in this particular matchup, which is good for all pass catchers, including Austin Eckler, who's on pace to catch like 120 or more balls in this particular season. But having Keenan Allen there and Gerald Everett and Palmer, probably the 3 top options there as far as people that are running routes and not expected to get handoffs. Otherwise, Eckler is kind of de facto number 1 with Keenan Allen there and Mike Williams out. On the run blocking side, it's not a good matchup for the Chargers. 28th and 30th. Vegas number 10 and 23 at stopping the run. I expect the Chargers to just air the ball out here. I believe they have a coach that would like to do that. And Herbert, we saw with 300 plus yards, 3 touchdowns last week. Wouldn't be surprised to see that again this week, especially if Vegas is able to push the pace here. And we can see them at number 11 and number 17 in the offensive pass categories, while the Chargers are at 21 and 15 in the pass rush on the defense. This suggests Vegas should have a little bit of time to throw the ball. This is very good for Devontae Adams. Keep an eye also on the Jacobs injury there. If Jacobs is out in this game, I'd expect several more targets to go Adams' way, and them to lean a little bit more heavily on him, as Jacobs is kind of that safety blanket and ability to get some yardage when they need it. If that's the case, I think they're going to be passing the ball quite a bit more than they otherwise would have had Jacobs been there. Getting into the run game, phenomenal matchup yet again for Vegas, number 1 and number 4 versus the Chargers, 28 and 29. Again, this is like 5 or 6 weeks in a row that's been a studs eat or good matchup for the Raiders in terms of the pass protection. So Adams has been super good the last 5 or 6 weeks. And then it's been either studs eat or phenomenal matchups here in the run game. And as we've seen, Jacobs is absolutely destroyed in the last 5 or 6 weeks. This is another situation where the run game should absolutely dominate if Jacobs is out. Zamir White would likely get the bulk of the work as far as kind of what Jacobs was doing, but it doesn't seem like they want to lean on him particularly much even to spell Jacobs. It seems like Jacobs is getting the vast majority of the work, and then they got guys like Amir Abdullah that they're giving a lot of snaps to. So if Jacobs is out, it might be a split between Zamir White and Amir Abdullah. Something like that. If that's the case, I think Zamir White would end up getting very chalky, and that might be a situation where it's almost one of those, hey, this is one of those things where maybe you avoid that chalk. We haven't seen him get that workload or spell Jacobs really. We don't really see him do that, or haven't seen him do that yet this season, so there's no reason to believe that this game would be any different if they go without Jacobs. You can't just plug and play Zamir White, a more physically gifted athlete than Jacobs for sure in a smash spot. it makes sense. I would get him in a few lineups. I think I would be underweight compared to the field. If Jacobs is ruled out, I think he would get pretty popular, kind of heated up a little bit as far as getting him into your lineup. And that, to me, at that point becomes an avoid and more of a, I want absolutely to smash Devontae Adams into my lineups. So Chargers pass game, Vegas pass game should be very effective. Jacobs in the run game, if he does play, just be careful. He could leave mid-game, which is probably going to be, making his roster percentage probably pretty low just in general. People probably nervous about him, leaving mid-game. Anyway, we'll get on to the number 3 game on the slate, the number 4 game on the slate. Tied for 4th, actually, Miami and San Francisco. Cleveland and Houston are the 2 games with the 46.5 game total from Vegas. San Francisco, 4-point home favorites, 25.25 team implied total. Miami, 21.25 team implied total. Getting into the Miami pass protection side, number 13 and number 1 in the offensive pass categories for pass protection. And San Francisco, number 8 and number 10 in the defensive pass rush and defensive pass DVOA. This is more of a studs eat type of situation, a little bit below average matchup there for Miami. Means they're probably going to have to get the ball out a little bit quicker. And we've seen this kind of fit into Miami's normal offense. I think they do get the ball out and do have a pretty solid average depth of target when they do get the ball out, but they're able to get it out quick. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle certainly plenty capable of getting the ball, quickly and doing things with it in their hands. I think Jalen Waddle just in general has been the one that's benefited from these situations where maybe Miami is going to have a little bit more pressure. Heads up, I think that's going to be the case in this. San Francisco's defense is solid, but Miami has lost both of their tackles. One is out for sure. I'm pretty sure the other one is listed as doubtful with some issues. So both tackles will be out in this particular matchup, which means Miami's probably going to be under duress a little bit more, trying to get the ball out a little bit quicker. The guys that are going to be open quicker are going to be Hill and Waddle. Waddle seems to run more of the routes that are, quicker options. So I think Waddle should see a massive target increase in this just with those tackles being out. Just be careful that Miami might not be able to move the ball as effectively without those tackles. And we did see at the end of last week, Tua ended up taking a bunch of sacks after the tackles went out against, who were they playing last week? Is Houston. They were just crushing them 30 to rip at half. He was getting sacked actually at the end of the first half after the tackles went out. Took another few at the very beginning of the third quarter, and then they just pulled him after that. But he was taking some hits. I expect this to be more of the same from San Francisco side. The big DFS big box store DFS shows are telling you to attack this matchup, Miami and San Francisco. On the surface, maybe that looks good, but I think Miami is going to have a little difficulties with their tackles out. They're not going to be able to move the ball as well, not going to have as much time to pass. The run game probably is going to suffer on that end, so Jeff Wilson's kind of out of my DFS pool. San Francisco is number 2 and number 2 in stopping the run. Miami 12th and 14th, so that's a below average for sure matchup for Miami's run game. Now we have tackles that are missing. I just think Miami's actually going to struggle in this particular matchup. Moving the ball with much effectiveness. I think Waddle's the piece that you're going to want from Miami. And, Hill always can surprise you. I just think Waddle's going to be the one that, I wouldn't be surprised to see 13 or 14 targets at the end of this particular matchup. On the San Francisco side, they're number 9 and number 5 in the offensive pass protection categories. Miami, number 22 and 25 at getting after the quarterback. Huge favor for San Francisco. They should have plenty of time to throw the ball. Typically, this year, this has meant very good games for Brandon Ayuk. I would expect more of that. I would also expect Kittle, who has come on as of late, to have a big week in the pass game here as they have plenty of time to get the ball to him. On the run game side, San Francisco 6 and 21, Miami 5 and 12. kind of a studs eat type thing. Fortunately for San Francisco, they have a stud. His name is Christian McCaffrey. But he does have a weird knee issue. Jordan Mason, we've seen kind of sub in there. Not interested in that in DFS, but if I was going to do anything in this game, it's going to be Ayuk and it's going to be Waddle and Kittle. I don't know if I'm going to want to stack any of this game with the quarterbacks. I could certainly have egg on my face, but I think that's just going to be how this is. Miami, not going to be super effective on offense. San Francisco should be fairly effective, but maybe CMC's out and they're leaning more on Jordan Mason, which I don't like, but that's going to leave Brandon Ayuk and Kittle to be putting up a lot of this offense in a good scenario for the San Francisco offense. So that's how to attack this game. Don't listen to the big box store DFS shows. I don't think this is one you're going to want to attack. It would be Waddle for me. Tyreek certainly always in play to give you a big game, but I don't think this is necessarily a spot. I think it's going to be quicker dump off passes, and Waddle seems to be the one that benefits most when Miami has to get the ball out of their hand quickly. Tyreek also does well, but we see Waddle get the most of the targets. Getting on to the other number 4 game on the slate is Cleveland at Houston. We see Cleveland going into Houston Dome there, 46.5 Vegas game total. They are 7-point road favorites, 26.75 team implied total for Cleveland. Houston, 19.75 team implied total. Getting into the Cleveland pass protection side, got Deshaun Watson coming back. Number 12 and number 8 in the offensive pass categories. Houston 19 and 24. This is in the favor of Cleveland. They should, it's not a great matchup, but it is positive there. 7 spots difference. I think Watson should have time to throw the ball. We'll see what kind of chemistry he has with the players on his team. I'm not sure what he's been doing, for the last year and a half, 2 years while he's not been playing football or got traded to Cleveland. Who he's going to favor in this particular matchup. And Njoku is out. Just keep that in mind. If they are getting time to throw, I do like Donovan Peoples-Jones and Schultz as options to get a deep bomb in this particular thing. Watson's very good at that, as we saw with Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins back in the Houston days. Revenge game narrative. However, how Cleveland moves the ball in Houston, I believe, is going to be the run game. They're number 14 in run blocking, 3rd in run DVOA. Houston 30th and 30th in stopping the run. They finally did stop the run against Miami to an extent last week, but again, Miami was up big. I think they were just kind of mailing it in when it was 30-0. They lost some tackles. I don't think that's going to be the case for Cleveland here. They're going to run all over Houston, and with a lot of these cheap running backs that may become available with these injuries, Samaj P. and we'll get into a few others later, like Zamir White we had talked about already. I think Chubb is going to get overlooked. He's going to be very low rostered, and he could be one of those guys that's like a slate breaker where he's just going off for 180 and 3 touchdowns. So, slate breaker choice, Nick Chubb. I think that would be a very good one, especially as people start to get back on the Deshaun Watson and Cleveland Browns pass game there. I think Chubb gets overlooked in this one and could have a monster week. On the Houston side, number 26 and 32 in the offensive pass protection. Cleveland 15 and 22 in the pass rush categories. A little bit in the favor there of Houston. I'd expect Cleveland to be getting after the quarterback there. Houston going to need to dump it off a little bit quicker. That tends to mean more passes to the underneath receivers. Or if they don't really have any good ones there, which Houston doesn't, the running backs and the tight ends. Fortunately for Houston, they got Dameon Pierce there, who seems like he is a solid guy once he gets the ball in his hands. I don't know how he is at running routes. I don't think he's any savant there. But Pierce is really the only guy from Houston's side that I have any interest in playing. Just the run blocking, 27 and 28. Cleveland actually even worse than Houston, 31 and 31 in the defensive run stopping categories. I would expect Dameon Pierce to have a pretty solid week on this as well. One of those guys that you can maybe, sneak by some people that are kind of disappointed in his last few weeks when he's had some bad matchups. This is not one of those cases. I think Dameon Pierce will go over 100 yards. He likely scores a touchdown in this particular matchup. And I would not be surprised to see him get 4 to 6 targets in this as Houston kind of gets under duress there with Kyle Allen under the helm. Just keep that in mind. Otherwise, outside of Chubb and Pierce, I'm not necessarily super interested in getting a ton of pieces from this Cleveland game. I'm more in a wait and see mode on the pass side for Cleveland. Houston pass game side, I'm not super interested in this. I am, however, interested in some Dameon Pierce targets, and I think he's going to be very effective on the ground, giving you over 100 yards total in this game, as well as some receptions. So that's the other number 4 game on the slate. After that, we get into the number 6 games on the slate, and there's 3 of them actually that are tied for 6. Tennessee and Philly, which we'll go over first. The New York Jets at Minnesota, which we'll go over second. Then Green Bay at Chicago. They're all tied for the exact same game total. Looking at it, Tennessee and Philadelphia here, that game total is 44.5 this week. Again, tied for 6th on the slate out of 12 games. Philly, 4.5 point home favorites here. Tennessee, 20-point team implied total. Philadelphia, 24.5 team implied total. Getting into the Tennessee offensive side here, their offensive pass protection, 23-13. Philly, 5-2. Expect Philadelphia to be getting after the Tennessee quarterback there. Tannehill, would not be surprised to see them get several sacks in this. Lots of pressures. Tennessee's going to need to get the ball out a little bit quicker. Not entirely sure there who they got to run these underneath routes in Tennessee. I'll be honest, really, Burks is the only person of interest for me on this pass game side. Woods has shown himself not to be super effective. The tight ends don't seem to get involved. Burks is really the only pass game option there, and it's not looking like a great matchup there unless he's running some short routes, which I haven't really looked into here. The run game side, though, with Derrick Henry and Tennessee being under duress, I could see him getting another 3 to 5 targets in this game, which is good for him. But the run blocking, number 11, number 18, Philly, 25th and 24th. We just saw Green Bay run all over them. There's a little bit more favorable of a matchup for Green Bay with their offensive run blocking unit, but Tennessee has been good for most of the year too. I'd expect Derrick Henry to be able to have a solid game here as well. As Tennessee kind of struggles to pass the ball, I think he sees some dump offs, and I think he kind of gets his wheels moving in this particular matchup, and he's really the only person in Tennessee that I'm interested in rostering anywhere this particular week. On the Philadelphia side, number 21 and number 6 in the offensive pass DVOA, Tennessee 20th and 17th. There's a studs eat scenario. I like it for A.J. Brown. I don't necessarily think Devonta Smith is a stud. He's good in his own right, but I think there's more of an A.J. Brown setup type week. I think he could smash, especially in a revenge game here for him. On the run blocking side, Tennessee's number 1 in both defensive run stopping and the run DVOA. Philly number 4 and 1st in the offensive run categories. Kind of a studs eat scenario. I don't think Philly has any studs there. For me, I think they'll be fine running the ball. It's just not going to be the Miles Sanders week. Like I said last week when they were in a smash spot against Green Bay, I said you want both Green Bay running backs in your DFS lineup on Sunday night. Run it back with Jalen Hurts, and you want Miles Sanders in there as well in the run game. And that turned out to be very successful last week, Sunday night. So if you followed my advice, you probably took home quite a bit of money in those island games. I expect this to be more of the Derrick Henry show for Tennessee, and then it's going to be A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts actually on the Philadelphia side putting up the vast majority of the points here. I think those are the best football players on each team. And Philadelphia is mainly in a studs eat scenario there on their offense. And I think that's going to lean heavily towards the guys that, like A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, who will put up those fantasy points for them and produce in this particular matchup. On to the next game, which is New York Jets at Minnesota. Jets going into Minnesota as 3-point underdogs, 20.75 team implied total for the Jets. Minnesota, 23.75 team implied total. Again, that Vegas game total, 44.5 that these 3 games are tied for at 6th on the week. Getting into the New York Jets offensive pass protection, they're 16th and 19th. Minnesota 11 and 27 in the pass DVOA. I know people have liked to pick on the Minnesota side there for pass game. I think this is probably how the Jets are going to have to move the ball. It's not a great matchup for them, but it is, below average, five below there. I think Minnesota should be able to get some pressure on Mike White. However, I think Jets have plenty of pass game options. This kind of lining up for me to be a Garrett Wilson type week, as is like every week, right? Elijah Moore, I wouldn't be surprised if he sees a few more targets in this game, especially if you think Minnesota is going to be getting after that Jets offensive quarterback there, Mike White, and he needs to get the ball out a little bit quicker. I think Elijah Moore is the one that's going to benefit the most from some underneath targets, along with Conklin. Conklin in a revenge game there against his former Vikings team. Those are my 3 favorite ones, along with Mike White in the pass game. As far as the run blocking goes, number 22 and 12 for the Jets, 11 and 16 for Minnesota there. Pretty big favor for Minnesota's defense in stopping the run. We have Michael Carter is doubtful, so it looks like Bam Knight's going to be in there running the rock and maybe getting some of those pass game options. James Robinson probably going to be activated in this particular matchup. I would expect them to kind of split the work, although it seems like the coaching staff there isn't super big on James Robinson, even though they traded for him, picked him up mid-season there, and then he was inactive last week. So it's kind of a weird situation there, but I would expect that game to not be super great, and they're going to have to lean more heavily on Mike White in that pass game. Fortunately for them, Minnesota does give it up in the pass game. Garrett Wilson could certainly have a monster week here. I don't want to put the combo breaker as far as slate breaking upside, but he's probably going to be very good in this particular matchup, as I don't think they're going to run the ball very effectively, and they're going to have to move the ball through the air. And it is in a dome with good weather. Mike White, he's on my Scott Fishbowl team. I really hope he has a monster week against the Vikings here. And my team, the Vikings, the one that I root for along with the Bengals, I'd like them to win, but I'd also like to see Mike White get a monster game here. I just don't know, based on this, if that's going to be happening, but we'll see. On the Minnesota offensive side, they're number 10 and 20 in the offensive pass protection categories. The Jets, number 9 and number 5. I expect Cousins, 3rd game in a row here, to be kind of under duress. We saw on Thursday in Thanksgiving game against the Patriots, he did perform well. I think he had over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Could be the case here for the Jets, against the Jets, that he does that. I think that's gonna be how Minnesota moves the ball as well. Similar to the Jets side, where the run game isn't that good. The pass game isn't great, but that's probably going to be how they move the ball in this particular game. Again, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, probably your favorite targets as far as receivers. And then getting into the tight end, Hawkinson certainly would be in play, especially if you think the Jets are actually going to be getting after Minnesota a little bit. I think Hawkinson gets a few more dump-offs, and wouldn't be surprised to see him with 8 to 10 targets in this matchup. On the run game, Jets cross the board, number 6 at stopping the run. Minnesota 17th and 20th. Big favor there for the Jets defense. I don't expect Dalvin Cook to have a very good game. Cross him out of your player pool in this particular matchup. He's going to be on my fades list in the tweet that I send out, so take a look at that. Both teams do play relatively fast. We have Minnesota almost green across the board as far as their pace. Jets almost green across the board, or 3 out of the 5. So the pace could get pushed in here. That would be good for both pass games if that's how they're indeed moving the ball. I just expect the offenses to not be able to push the ball as effectively as they would like to. Wouldn't be surprised to see the kickers in this game. The Jets kickers, Minnesota kickers have a pretty solid week in this particular matchup. Just keep that in mind for anybody that's starting kickers out there. Jets probably don't have their kickers probably still sitting somewhere on the waivers. I wouldn't be shy about starting him in any lineups this week. The Vikings kicker is probably not sitting on waivers. for those of you in kicker leagues like the Scott Fish Bowl, the Jets kicker this week could be solid. Getting on to the last number 6 game on the slate. Again, 3 games tied for the 6th highest this week at 44.5. We have Green Bay going into Chicago as 3.5-point favorites. Green Bay a 24-point team implied total. Chicago 20.5 team implied total. Green Bay number 6 in offensive pass protection and 15th in the offensive pass DVOA. They did lose Bakhtiari for this week. He had an appendectomy midweek. He's going to be out this week. Could be Chicago has a little bit more easier time getting after the quarterback. I would doubt it, though, because their defense is pretty poor. I would expect Green Bay to have plenty of time to pass the ball. It's going to be good for pretty much everyone in the pass game. I do like Cobb. He's probably still cheap, despite having several, good, solid games here in a row. Lazard, we've seen kind of take a back seat the last few weeks, and it's really been the rookie there, Watson, who has kind of, emerged in the absence of Lazard, kind of cooling down. I wouldn't be surprised to see him with a solid week. And then getting in the run blocking, Green Bay number 2 and number 7, Chicago 24th and 28th. Chicago got one of the worst defenses in the league. Green Bay should be able to run the ball very effectively. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon should have very solid weeks. I do expect Green Bay to be able to pass the ball very effectively, so I wouldn't be surprised in this particular matchup, especially it sounds like Justin Fields is going to play, and I think Chicago will be able to put up some points on Green Bay. I would not be surprised, if this one ends up being a pretty solid shootout, and Green Bay being able to, put up 4 or 5 touchdowns in this matchup against such a poor defense. On the Chicago side, they're 32nd and 28th in the offensive pass protection categories. Green Bay, middle of the pack, 17 and 11. Big favor there for Green Bay. Expect them to get some pressure on the quarterback. Sounds like that's going to be Justin Fields. Defense may be in play here if you think they're going to get a lot of plays off, except both of these teams kind of play really slow, which probably limits the defense's opportunities to get those points and sacks and turnovers, although Green Bay should have plenty of opportunities, to kind of get after the quarterback and cause those sack fumbles or, get some of those bad turnovers if they're getting after Justin Fields. It does probably mean some more Justin Fields dropbacks turn into scrambles and rush attempts for him, which is good for his offensive production. On the run blocking side for Chicago, number 10 and number 10. Green Bay dead last, 32nd and 32nd in the run stopping categories. Expect David Montgomery to be very effective in this particular matchup, combined with Chicago not being able to pass the ball very effectively. I think it's David Montgomery and Justin Fields, really your only options on Chicago there. And as I said, I don't think Green Bay is going to have an issue necessarily moving the ball. I wouldn't be surprised to see them score 4 or 5 touchdowns. On the opposite side, I think Chicago is going to struggle a little bit more. Justin Fields can certainly, put the team on his back. Montgomery certainly capable. I see them struggling a little bit more. We did lose some weapons there with Mooney for Chicago, so I don't think that's going to be a very good situation. This could be the Claypool breakout. I'm not sure who's running those underneath routes for Chicago, but he certainly has some physical tools if he gets the ball in his hands to make some things happen. But really, I don't think Chicago's going to put up a ton of points in this. 14-17, somewhere in that range. I'd be surprised if they score 3 touchdowns or get near that 20.5 team implied total. I wouldn't be surprised to see Green Bay be able to move the ball, surgical precision as they go down, chunk gain 4 or 5 rush yards. Here's a pass play for 5 or 6 yards. Here's another run for 6 yards. Here's a pass for 4. Here's a run for 6. And they just kind of slowly, methodically go down the field. They put up 4 or 5 touchdowns, and then Chicago struggles a little bit on offense. Getting into the next game on the slate, that's going to be number 9 now, after the 3 ties for 6th, 7th, and 8th. Pittsburgh at Atlanta, number 9, and I think this is where you can start getting a little bit different and probably a fairly chalky week on those top 3 games. We have Pittsburgh at Atlanta here, 21.75 team implied total for Pittsburgh as 1-point road favorites. Going into Atlanta, 20.75 team implied total for Vegas game total overall of 42.5. Again, 9th out of 12 on the slate. Pittsburgh, number 17 and 23 in the offensive pass protection categories. Atlanta, pretty poor, 31 and 29. They're also really poor at stopping the run at 29 and 15. Pittsburgh, 16th and 15th at the run blocking. Expect Pittsburgh to be able to move the ball pretty effectively against Atlanta. I do not mind the Pickett stacks this week. I think that's a good way to get very different from the rest of the field in this particular in any particular tournament this week. They should have plenty of time to pass the ball. I think Pickens would be good. I think Deontay Johnson will be good. I think Freiermuth. Those are the three guys that you can stack. Pittsburgh. The run game there could be a little bit interesting. As I was saying earlier with the running backs and getting cheap, it could be Jaylen Warren. It could be Benny Snell if they decide to hold Najee Harris out with the abdominal injury that he sustained. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but I fully expect Pittsburgh to be able to move the ball. The running backs should have plenty of opportunities to score touchdowns. I think Pickett will, have plenty of opportunities to run one in himself as well. I do like Pickens. I do like Deontay Johnson and Freiermuth in the pass game. I will certainly have a couple stacks of Kenny Pickett in some of my DFS tournament lineups. So keep that in mind. I think Pittsburgh's a very solid play. Guys that you can get one-offs and be successful, either running back, Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Freiermuth, something like that. They should be putting up some points in this particular matchup, so I like that. Atlanta, number 29 and 18 in the offensive pass protection. Pittsburgh, 25 and 16. They are improving, though, since they got Watt back. Expect them to be able to get after the quarterback. We could see Mariota struggle a little bit here, getting the ball to some people. It's been kind of the case the entire year. Atlanta a little bit more effective running the ball than they are passing it, and we can see why. Number 3 and number 8 in the offensive run blocking categories. Pittsburgh 15 and 8. It's kind of a three-way split there in Atlanta with Algier, Huntley, and Cordero Patterson. So they will be the main beneficiaries of this run blocking unit. Atlanta might find themselves with a little bit more time to pass than they're used to with this Pittsburgh defense, but as I said, with Watt back, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. I think their pass game's an avoid. Their run game, it's not one that I would expect somebody to be getting a massive workload and being super successful in doing so. Patterson's really the only one I think that has breakaway potential in the run game if you'd be able to take one to the house. I'd be a lot less surprised than if Algier or Huntley did that. So keep that in mind. I don't think there's an Atlanta player that I'll have on any of my lineups, but Pittsburgh I do like getting as one-off pieces to fill in my lineup without any sort of run back. So keep that in mind. I do like Pittsburgh side this week. Number 10 game on the slate, we have two of them. Washington at New York Giants. And then we have the other number 10, Seattle at the Rams. We'll start out here with Washington at the Giants. 40.5 game total here. 21.25 team implied total for Washington as the 2-point road favorites. New York Giants at home, 19.25 team implied total. Washington offensive pass protection, number 20th and 26th. Giants 26th and 28th. This is more of like a studs eat scenario. Washington, might find themselves with a little bit more time than they're used to in these particular matchups. McLaurin, very good at football. I think he could be in line for a solid week here against the Giants. And the run blocking side is very similar, 21 and 25 for Washington, 26th and 27th for the Giants. Similar scenario there. I think Gibson's good at football. Robinson seems like he can be effective at times. Really, if I'm attacking this game, it's going to be McLaurin, or it's probably going to be Gibson and maybe Robinson as the only three options that I want for this particular matchup. We've seen Curtis Samuel kind of dip off the last few weeks in his production as Brian Robinson's kind of got more and more involved, and Gibson gets more and more involved in the pass game. On the Giants side, they're 30th in offensive pass protection, number 12 in offensive pass DVOA, Washington 14 across the board in pass rush categories. They should be able to get after the Giants here. They're pretty much down to nobody to pass to. Kenny Golladay. Who else is over there? Marcus Johnson, maybe. Slayton. It's not good. We saw Wan'Dale Robinson get injured there. It looks like he's out for the season. It's just gross there. If they're going to be under pressure, it could be more Saquon Barkley targets. But even his situation isn't good this week. Number 23, run blocking for Giants, number 11 in the run DVOA because they're a little bit more explosive. But Washington, number 9 and number 4 at stopping the run. Again, this is a fade Barkley type of week. You're probably putting them into your season-long leagues regardless, but not somebody that I'm going to be playing in DFS. And really, the only option on this particular matchup that I'm interested in for any sort of DFS is McLaurin. I don't think anyone else is worth your time as far as giving you a ceiling game this week. So pretty much an avoid except for the McLaurin. As far as season-long leagues, I think you can't really sit Barkley, but if you got some other options, I wouldn't be opposed to it this week. Getting into the other number 10 game on the slate is Seattle going into the Rams. They are 7-point road favorites. Rams actually 16.75 team implied total at home. Absolutely gross. Again, 40.5 Vegas game total. Seattle accounting for 23.75 of those. Tied for 10th on the slate out of 12, which means they're the bottom two score at 40.5 there. Seattle offensive pass protection number 27 and number 4. Rams number 16 and 26. I don't expect Seattle to be very effective moving the ball in the air on this. I think the Rams can put some pressure on Geno. They're going to need to get the ball out a little bit quicker. That's probably going to be more dump offs to the tight ends. Will Disley, as well as the running back there, Homer and Walker, I would expect to see a bump up in targets. On the run blocking side, Seattle number 31 and 23, the Rams 14 and 5. I think the Rams are going to be able to, stop Seattle here and kind of prevent that offense from moving in this particular matchup. It's at home. Certainly would bet the line as far as Rams not getting blown out by 7 or more. I don't expect them to be putting up points, but I don't expect them, Seattle, to be able to move the ball very effectively against the Rams. Definitely would take the under in this particular matchup as we get into the Rams side. 25 and 25 in the offensive pass protection. Seattle 13th and 21. I would expect, Seattle to be able to get some pressure on the Rams. They have John Wolford coming back to lead their team on offense. They're 31st and 27th in run blocking. Seattle 21st and 19. Again, in the favor of Seattle's defense there. This is why I say take the under. Rams won't be able to move the ball. Seattle won't be able to move the ball. Would not be surprised to see both of these teams, crest. Would not cresting 17. If this ends up like a 17-7 matchup, I would not be surprised. 13-7, 13-3. I think that's the type of game you're looking at. You're not going to want any pieces for DFS, and they are somewhat of an avoid in your season-long leagues, even though it might pain you to do so with a DK Metcalf or Geno Smith. Just be careful. Getting into the worst game on the slate, super gross, Denver at Baltimore. I'm going to try not to throw up. Okay. 15 team implied total for Denver as 9.5-point road underdogs. Baltimore 24.5 team implied total at home. Again, 9.5-point favorites. 39.5 Vegas game total. Denver 24th and 27th in the offensive pass categories. Baltimore 6th and 8th in the defensive pass rush categories. Expect them to be able to get after Russell Wilson. This is going to be bad news for Denver's offense and moving the ball. They're already poor at it, and this is not a good situation for them. Baltimore defense certainly in play. I think they could get pick sixes, plenty of sacks, things like that. Russell Wilson just playing poor, and this doesn't bode well for him either. The run game, Denver 18 and 26, Baltimore 13 and 9 at stopping the run. I don't think Denver is going to be able to run the ball either. I would be very surprised if Denver scores over 14 points in this. They have a 15 team implied total. I don't think they even reach that, so keep that in mind. If they score 6, 12, somewhere in that range, I'd be very surprised. But that's about all I would expect from them. 6 to 10 points and Baltimore to dominate. As far as Baltimore is concerned, they are pretty much studs eat across the board. 18-7 in the pass versus Denver's 18-4. That's very even. Baltimore doesn't really have any studs outside of Andrews in the pass game. I'd expect him to have a good game, and I'd expect Lamar, to have to put people on his shoulders in this particular matchup and do everything himself. It'll be him and the Andrews show, I believe. When looking at the run blocking, 26-2 for Baltimore, Denver 27-17. Kind of a studs eat, or those who are good at football will do well. I don't know if Baltimore really has any studs there, but if they're up big because Denver can't move and Baltimore, has put up 14 points and they're getting the ball back and it's early, I wouldn't be surprised to see a Gus Edwards game where he's getting 80 to 90 yards on a lot of volume, maybe sneaking in one touchdown for you, but really it's pretty much a hands off. I don't think Denver can push Baltimore enough for Lamar to have a ceiling game, nor for Andrews to really put up a ton of points unless he's scoring all of the Baltimore touchdowns in this matchup. It's pretty much a hands-off as the worst game on the slate. And that will do it for the main slate. We'll get into these island games, which have been very successful for the followers of this program as well as myself. Sunday Night Football, Indianapolis at Dallas. We have this as a 44-point Vegas game total. Dallas 10.5-point home favorites, 27.25 team implied total. Indianapolis 16.75 team implied total. Getting into the Indy offensive pass protection, 31st and 31st, so they are bottom of the barrel there in the league. Dallas, number 1 and number 1. This is almost as large of a discrepancy as you can get in these matchups. Expect Indy to be under duress, needing to get the ball out quick. We did see Jelani Woods with 9 targets last week in a similar situation. I think we're going to see a lot more dump offs. That's going to be Paris Campbell and guys that can get open for Matt Ryan to get the ball to, which would be more so the Michael Pittman show. But I don't think they're going to be very effective in the pass game in this. Matt Ryan could look really bad. Dallas's defense should be in a lot of your lineups. They're going to be super expensive, I'd imagine, but just something to watch out for. And the run stopping, Dallas 17-10, Indy offensive run blocking 30th and 32nd, which is poor. I wouldn't expect Jonathan Taylor either to have a very effective week this week, considering the run blocking game also looks poor. That's really going to be how they actually move the ball is probably with Jonathan Taylor. It's not going to be good for Indy. I'd be very surprised if they can put up, 14 points in this particular matchup. I would bet they're under as far as their line is concerned. The Dallas side, number 4 in offensive pass protection. Indy, number 10 at stopping or defensive pass rush. DVOA is pretty matched up there. Dallas at 16, Indy at 13. Again, this is one of those scenarios where, hey, the people that are good at football are going to do well. I think this is a CeeDee Lamb game all the way. Schultz also seems to be heavily targeted by Dak, especially in these matchups where maybe they're not going to have as much time as they would like to throw the ball. So Lamb and Schultz probably biggest beneficiaries in this particular matchup. Similar situation there in the run stopping. Dallas number 7 and 6 at running the ball, but Indy number 4 and 11 at stopping the run. Another situation where it's kind of those who are good at football will do well in this particular matchup. I think this is Pollard. I think he's going to have the better week this week, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him kind of overtake Zeke in this particular matchup, as Dallas maybe struggles a little bit just to move the ball consistently, which probably means they're grinding out 10, 12 play drives, getting into third down situations where you're going to see Pollard in there getting some more dump off work. So really it's Pollard, it's Schultz, and it's Lamb that I like on the Dallas side in this particular matchup. This is an island game, so you're going to have to get somebody from Indianapolis in there. You want a Jelani Woods in Dallas defense, along with those other offensive players I mentioned from Dallas, and that's probably your island winning matchup. team that you're going to put in there. Getting into the Monday night football game, we have the Saints going into Tampa Bay as 3.5-point underdogs. Tampa Bay 22 team implied total. New Orleans 18.5 team implied total for a 40.5 Vegas game total. Kind of cringy, low number there. So Monday night game, island game. How can we attack this? New Orleans number 15 and 24 in the offensive pass categories. Tampa Bay number 2 and number 6 in the defensive pass rush categories. Tampa Bay should be able to get after New Orleans in this particular matchup. Saints are going to have to get the ball out more quickly. That's probably going to be Juwan Johnson. That's probably going to be Alvin Kamara in this particular matchup. Maybe some Taysom Hill. Olave certainly capable of getting open. He seems to be more of a deeper threat target. Landry, more the underneath target, which would benefit in this particular matchup. Tampa Bay, number 7 and 14 in stopping the run. Saints, 13 and 13 in run blocking. Slight favor there for the Tampa Bay defense. I don't expect the Saints to be able to move the ball very effectively. You're going to need some players on that side. In an island game, though, I would look towards maybe Juwan Johnson, Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill, if you think he can be one of those guys that's getting the New Orleans Saints touchdown, either passing or running. That's really what you're going to be looking for on the New Orleans Saints side. For the Tampa Bay Bucs side, they're number 1 and number 10 in the offensive pass categories, offensive pass protection and DVOA. Saints 7 and 12. A little bit of a favor there for Tampa Bay. They should be somewhat effective being able to move the ball, not under duress too crazy. Typically, these have been Godwin weeks. We haven't seen necessarily these big breakout games from Tampa Bay despite some of these positive matchups. The run game for Tampa Bay is a little bit below average, 24 and 31. Saints 19 and 21 at stopping the run. Again, I think that Tampa Bay is going to have to lean a little bit heavier on the pass game. Godwin, Julio Jones, I think, would be solid options in this particular matchup. Maybe some Rashad White in the pass game as well. But as you can see, Vegas game total 40.5. It doesn't look good. If I'm playing an island game, it's probably going to be, Tampa Bay defense maybe in the captain's chair, getting some Brady and Godwin. After that, it's going to get ugly just to kind of fill in some of those slots. If you think the, Saints guys might be a Taysom Hill, Juwan Johnson type of tight end to tight end pass game, you could go that route. But I think that's the kind of the way this game is going to go. Tampa Bay is going to have to move the ball in the air. Their defense should be pretty solid in this, getting after the quarterback. Wouldn't be surprised to see them score a touchdown in this or get quite a few sacks, which is good. I will probably be putting them into my captain's chair when I play this game. Just keep that in mind. Anyway, that's going to do it for the adjusted line play report in week 13. Fellas and ladies who are watching this, again, this is highly corollary stuff. We've won over 70% of the weeks. We've won money in large field tournament on FanDuel. Again, this is only 17 to 20% of the people actually, getting money, and we're hitting at, well above 50% rate on our teams that are making money in there. Nothing huge yet. We're 7.5x, 9x some of our lineups, but nothing's getting too crazy. We haven't come super close to taking down any large field tournaments yet, but we're certainly well on our way and making money in the interim. So if you would like to do that and get money on a week-to-week basis playing large field tournaments, you should listen to this show. Consider subscribing. Go over to Twitter, ToddZilla1337 and Zilla Fantasy on Twitter, and follow us there to get this adjusted line play info in text form and picture form. Anyway, that's going to do it for this particular show. Let's go out and win some money together, folks, in this Week 13 slate. Love ya, peace, and bye.